welcome into the show. Thanks for tuning in. It is Valentine's evening here at the U.S. Soccer AGM. We are live in Nashville, Tennessee, and we have some friends of the show, and normally they are on the phone, but tonight, and unfortunately it's only tonight, and it's not every day, we have some special friends of the show, Chris Kessel and John C.L. Morgan. Welcome into the show, guys. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great.
John?
No better place to be than Valentine's night, right?
Valentine's, I'm telling you. Those of us who don't have our wives here, special happy Valentine's Day. Monica, Chris's wife, is right over there. We're waving to her across the room. So guys, let's just continue the conversation we've been having offline all day. Last night, earlier today, this evening at the U.S. Soccer kind of meet and greet hangout night. You know, what of your? I was asking John a minute ago, Chris. John, what were your kind of thoughts coming into this? Is your first AGM? What were your thoughts coming into the AGM, and then what have you seen so far today?
Yeah. So first of all, if I do sound a little punchy, I'm almost going on like 24 hours of no sleep. Waking up early at 1:30 this morning, catching a bus down to Boston, flying down here. So I do apologize in advance.
What a trooper.
Yeah. But yeah, I've so far the event has been very well organized. I've tried to just kind of hang back and observe and watch. But it's been very interesting so far.
Chris, this is your third AGM.
Yep.
You and I have 3 in a row. This is always a time I look forward to being able to see you in person, living in different parts of the country. What have your thoughts been coming into this AGM and what you've seen so far?
I'm glad that I've been able to see a lot of people that I've met over the last couple years, had great conversations, and I'm really happy to see so many people talking about the policy proposals, the bylaw proposals, the efforts to change, the federation for the better, and the people behind the scenes who are a part of the whole process, and the learning curve that so many people are having with this. And I think that the more institutional knowledge that's created by this entire process, the better. The more people that understand that we are the members, we are the federation. The federation doesn't exist without all of the members. The more people that understand how all this works and that we can change it, and just because you're, whatever member doesn't mean that you can't try to participate in changing the federation for the better in totality. That's what we're here for. And it's good to see and good to talk to people that are finally having their eyes open to this. Whereas 2 years ago, people didn't even understand how the elections worked, and now everybody understands how this VP election is going to work tomorrow.
Right.
Like, everybody knows how it's going to work.
Well, for so long, speaking on the elections, Sunil was running unopposed, and there really was
not just Sunil. Like, it was like basically every election was unopposed.
Was pretty much an appointed position. It was like, we're going to put one name, let's rubber stamp that, and kind of just push it through, and everything's done. Obviously, that changed after 2017, the failure against Trinidad and Tobago, and then obviously we had this litany of candidates join the race, and we've obviously discussed that many times on the show. But I think that was an inflection point in terms of this awareness of process and how do we change. And I think state associations and other members are still learning and figuring out, like, hey, we can actually do some things that maybe we didn't realize we could do. That it's not just in the hands of a few people far off, that we can actually affect change in other ways. So, I agree with you, John. You coming in, And first, I just got to say, for anybody watching this, I'm jealous. I can't grow the facial hair that you two can grow. I mean, come on. It's like chia pets on your faces, and I can't get anything, man. It's like every other day I have to shave. It's a mandate in my house. My wife's like, I can't handle any scuzz or anything on your face, and I can't even if I wanted to.
Yep.
I can't do what you guys do. So I just, first off,
You don't live in the winter.
hats off.
They're winter guys.
Right.
Yeah. We do have gut solidarity, though.
Yes, we do have gut solidarity. Unfortunately, although my wife's like, you got to get rid of this thing. That extra pack of insulation's got to come on.
I've heard that a few times myself.
Yeah, it's got to happen. So with you coming in, John, back to this AGM,
Yep.
What did you take in today? Like, what meetings were you in? Did you find it, from an organizational standpoint, easy to navigate through all of the meetings? Like, did you feel like you got a good view of the whole picture, or did you feel like there was so much going on stacked on top of each other that you had to pick and choose? Like, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm here as an alternate with Soccer Maine. So I sort of had the freedom to, go into this meeting or go into that meeting. So I spent some time, I think, with the adult council meeting. I spent a little bit of time at the youth council meeting. I was interested in the athletes council meeting and the budget meeting, or the budget Q&A, I think it was. But I did find that those meetings in particular kind of overlapped with either the adult council or the youth council. So it was tough to be in 2 or 3 different places at the same time. I was a little disappointed that most of the athletes council, just because of the weight that they have in the decision-making process, especially, ahead of tomorrow's elections, I was a little disappointed that they were, I think they went into executive session probably like 20 minutes into the meeting. And then I think they were in executive session. I think some of us waited for an hour and a half, and they were still in executive session. But yeah, from the time I got here early this morning, the event has been very well organized by the support staff. I can't remember. I think it's the member staff or member support.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think you guys threw out some names that I can't.
Caitlin Carducci.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of leads up that team.
She does a great job.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure.
I mean, I think that's a perfect example of something that me and Daniel talk about all the time. The employees of the Federation, some of them are wonderful, hardworking, great soccer people, and they really, really care to do a good job. And they do a good job with events like this and other things that happen. And, USU Soccer has great employees, and USASA has some great employees, and like the events and the stuff. I mean, the staff do a great job. And so like when you hear people talk about like, we need change, we need this, we need it, like it's literally nothing to do with, the rank and file member, the employees. Like every single one of them you talk to, I mean, I've never met one that I haven't went, man, they do a good job.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like every single one of them, you're like, man, I understand why they hired this person. They're great.
For sure. Did you pick up on any of that today? Kind of your first AGM? What were your thoughts with people that you met that are, staff employees?
Yeah, like I said, from pre-registration to the check-in process, this event at, the Tin Roof downtown, everything was well organized, first class.
Speaking of, you can hear Chris's wife Monica in the background. She's a trooper and a hoot at the same time. So spending her Valentine's evening while her husband is she's graciously sharing you with us for a little bit. So hats off to her. The employees. Speaking of the employees, talking to some of them, kind of getting their feel. Does it seem like after the Glassdoor reviews that came out this summer, where even the New York Times were reporting on this about the culture?
It was a big story,
right? In the board meeting today, Chris, you were there, right next to me, taking in that board meeting. They talked about the culture and trying to improve the culture of the employees. Talking to some of the employees around this event, does it seem like this year, compared to say the last 2 years, that the staff seem to be in a better mood or nicer, or did you get that perception? I actually kind of felt like a lot of them were like going out of their way to be like, can I answer any questions for you? Can I help you with something? That has not necessarily been something I have felt in years past. I'm wondering, someone who heard that in the meeting, has had some different conversations with staff employees today. What was your... I can agree with that. And, I think actually this year was the first time that the meetings, the breakout sessions, that I really felt like people were open and they were attempting to answer all the questions. And I think some of that maybe has to do with some, leadership changes amongst people, but I think all three of us were in the budget Q&A meeting, and compared to the previous years, they answered every question, and it was only scheduled to go for an hour, and they went for over an hour and a half, and they continued to answer questions the whole time, and questions that were, quite frankly, like hard to answer. I mean, people were not holding back. People were not scared to ask hard questions, and they were giving answers that they, quite frankly, the year before, the last 2 years would have never answered. Right. And when you looked at the staff members, and there were, U.S. Soccer board members in the room. So it wasn't like they were even going, oh, well, since nobody's in here, I can say this. Yeah. No, there were U.S. Soccer board members in the room, in the crowd watching, and they were still giving answers. And I found that to be, hopeful. Whereas before, when you left that I'll totally admit that when I left that meeting last year, I was angry at how, the outgoing, chief, COO, the chief financial officer, right? Yeah. Jay Barhalter, CFO. Treated us, as members and people asking questions, and the way that he answered them, and, skirting around everything, and, being snarky and whatever. And Brian Remedy this year, I think that's how you say his name, Remedy. Brian Remedy. Like, I felt like he did a great job, and the actual staff that was in there, they did a great job answering our questions. I mean, obviously they didn't have all the answers. I mean, we were asking hard questions. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, we were... everybody that was in there was purposely in there to ask hard questions and put them on the spot. Like, you need to answer this. Right. And they did. Yeah. I mean, I told a couple U.S. Soccer staff today, if you've watched this show, and you guys have watched this show, you guys have been guests on this show many times. I am critical of the Federation because I want soccer to succeed in this country. I want it to reach its potential. I'm not, a lot of people try to measure this success on, well, we didn't have a pro league, now we do. That's not how I measure success. I look at what could we be, and are we there, right? So I measure it from the other end of the spectrum. That's how I view it. So therefore, it may come across at times, and this is what I told some of them, it may come across like I might be harsh, or you might take it personal that I'm being critical from a standpoint, I just want to be negative all the time. And I don't want to be negative. I don't like being, I actually just love having fun. What I wanted them to understand is that it is always from a place that I just want to see soccer reach its potential. It's why, for me, I said this when I first started this kind of saga or journey into what is this show when it was Soccer Works, and it was this, little 2-minute daily bite of information that has kind of morphed into what we're doing now. I said at the very beginning, I don't think that the vision statement and the mission statement of U.S. Soccer is actually that good or good enough.
It's not big enough.
It's not big enough. I think that we should be and could be the greatest soccer country on earth, and we shouldn't stop until we reach that goal.
Yeah.
We have all of the resources and potential to get there. And so whenever I look at things from that perspective, that's what I measured this thing on, and that's why I may say things that I say, nothing personal, but like, hey, could we do it better?
You're only hard on people that you care about and that you believe can do more.
Right.
And you only are that way on organizations that you care about and that you believe can do more.
And can do something about it.
And, I was having a discussion, and I think that maybe you both heard me having it with a staff member this evening, and I was like, look, you have to, and referees and whatever, we have a direct associations as member organizations with about 4 million children. And children, everybody deserves our best effort, but children absolutely deserve our best efforts. And if we're not giving our best efforts to help children who cannot stand up for themselves, who cannot affect change for, an organization like U.S. Soccer or like Alabama Soccer or West Virginia Soccer or Soccer Maine, a child cannot come to the board meeting at 6 years old and say, this is what needs to happen. They don't have the ability to do that. They don't have the worldview to do that. We have that. The federation has that. The leadership has that. And they deserve it. These are our neighbors. These are our children. These are the kids in our neighborhood that are going to be, when we're 80 years old, the mayor and the senator, and whatever. And they deserve it.
Right.
And sport helps children grow and become leaders and, learn how to be resilient and all of these lessons that sport does, even if you don't want to be, or even if you don't have the ability to be a national team player, a college player, even a high school player, you have the ability to learn all of those things through this game. And if you're not out here, organization, because that's what we're here to do, in addition to all the other things. But that has to be one of the main things that you worry about, the future of this nation.
Right. John, in the sessions that you took in today, conversations that you may have overheard or had yourself, was there anything that really stood out to you that maybe surprised you that you didn't, you didn't think, hey, I would hear this or learn this or whatever?
I think what may have surprised me is, and I think Chris talked about this earlier, just some of the depth of the conversations.
Gotcha.
A lot of pointed out, the professional staff has been, I have nothing to compare it to, of course. But I know, conversations you guys were having, conversations I was sort of just eavesdropping on. They were very engaged. It was a 15-minute conversation about, the difference between a bylaw and a policy and how that process should work out. And, but not just the process questions, but the substance questions, the proposals that West Virginia made related to voting rights for or voting weight for the divisions on the men's and women's side. I think who was it? Illinois adult.
Yep.
Their proposal related to professional standards. So not only questions about the processes involved with those proposals and other proposals, but the actual substance of those proposals as well. So that was refreshing.
Chris, as going through that process, you sat through a board meeting. You heard them discuss West Virginia's, I guess, 2, maybe 3 iterations that kind of went for review, and now there's a final version. They ultimately said in the board meeting that they did not support the policy amendment and did not adopt it. They
felt like, our the rules committee who gave the feedback to us, and I had a great, probably 20-minute conversation with her, and she gave me obviously a lot more in depth. I mean, for those of everybody that follow me on Twitter, I mean, I shared the feedback that we were given. It was maybe 2 paragraphs long, and it didn't really go into the depth that we were able to talk about face to face. And while I still don't agree, like, I could at least say, all right, you do have a reason, it's a reasonable reason that a person could go, all right, I see where you come from. And as I told her at the end, I was like, it's your job to look at this and say, hey, what is a good lawyer who wants to defeat this if it goes to trial going to do?
Right.
And they're good lawyers, and they gave a reasonable case, so obviously, just to let everybody know what's going to happen tomorrow, we're going to rescind, before the vote happens, and our executive director is going to give the reasons why we're going to rescind it, and going to let everybody know that we are going to make it as a bylaw proposing the change. So we're going to keep working to make it happen. We're not going to give up, and it is a hard process, like our league board, and he's a fellow club president. And if we're going to change a bylaw, I can call him and we can talk about it, and we can call everybody and we can just work it out until everybody's fine with it. But with an organization of this size, there is no way to call everybody involved in this process. Right. So this is our first time understanding how it works, and hopefully what's going to happen, because there was a lot more policy and bylaw amendments this time than any time over the last quite a few years. If you go back and look through the minutes of all the AGMs previously, this is like way more than any year before. And I think that a lot of people are learning this process now. Like I think I mentioned it earlier. So the conversation with the rules committee member that I talked to was like, why is this not more of a collaborative process? Like, if you know that we really want to do this, why didn't you send back, more detailed information of, hey, look, this is why we think it, because if it just says we think that it should be a bylaw, okay, well, why?
Yeah.
Like, so
it's like accepted or denied for a college application. Like,
exactly.
You're getting in or you're not.
Exactly.
Right? And no, like, well, if you were to have done this, we would have accepted you. If you
exactly.
Did. Right.
And, so and she did tell me, she was like, I wish it was more of a collaborative process, but this is the way that it works, so now we know, if you think about it and you come up with something, if you start the process, in March, you then have like 8 sets of feedback that you can potentially get, and you can, talk to Greg Fike, the lead attorney for the federation, and get direct feedback, which, I didn't really know that. You know what I mean? Like, now you think about it, information available. I was like, obviously, people that are fans of the national team don't care to read about how a bill becomes a law. You know what I mean? Right. I was like, but
hey, what do you want to do? Hey, what do you want to do Friday night? Let's sit down and figure out how to write a policy.
Exactly. Exactly. On Valentine's Day. Exactly.
On Valentine's Day.
Exactly. So, but I was like, look, this is an important piece of information, and this is part of your job. I mean, everything isn't just, how to, monetize fans for the national teams. Like, this is an important piece of your communication effort, and like, you need to like document exactly how this works, and so that every member, because member communication is part of your job, to let us know this is exactly how it works. You're allowed to do this communication. You're allowed to do this. This is the next step after that. This is what's going to happen when they send it back. You're still allowed to send it in, because you got it in before the deadline. You can still do all these different changes and blah, 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 which until you do the process, you don't know.
Right.
And the thing is we would have probably handled this entire process differently if we would have known at the beginning that, how it was going to work.
Yeah, I asked a couple questions today to a few different members of the staff. One was concerning, and I got some feedback similar to what I think you got, and for me it was tough. But Neil, if you're watching this show,
I'm sure he is.
And Neil, I know you're staying up on Valentine's Day and watching the Daniel Workman Show on Valentine's night. I told you then, and I say this to everybody, like, it's not about gotcha. It's just about like, hey, let's look at the game, and I love to just have conversations. Like, I want to step out of the AGM for just a minute and just kind of like, you mentioned Twitter, like your interactions with people with Twitter. That was the genesis for me connecting with both of you,
right.
And so many people around the world. Before we get back into all of the U.S. soccer AGM minutia and some of the stuff that we're going to look forward to tomorrow, how cool is it to live in a time where you can meet people and make connections and build relationships through a social media platform like Twitter that is literally can connect you with people all over the world? I know it has for me. You guys are sitting on this couch, and we're all connected here because of a platform like Twitter. I mean, they're not a sponsor of the show, but
right.
Here's a shameless plug for that specific platform. But
let's be honest. 20 years ago, did you even know U.S. soccer existed? I knew that the national team existed. Okay.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
I knew they existed, but I certainly didn't know what all was inside the organization. Right? You only knew at that point a couple of national team kind of things.
Right.
But I'll say, looking in on my side, these two look awfully alike.
That middle school girl that holds the pillow over her stomach.
When I think about over the last 5 years, when I've really gotten into club soccer and trying to improve soccer in our state and working with the state association in Maine over the last couple of years, like, I don't know. So go back to, pre-Twitter, even with the internet, I mean, the learning curve is so steep.
Right.
And I'm sometimes I think about how, because it flattens geography, right? Mm-hmm. We've got Alabama, West Virginia, Maine. And not only that, but also you're able to engage with people who, whether they're media personalities or people who are running clubs elsewhere. I mean, the resource is such a valuable resource for learning more about soccer in our country.
And I bring up the Twitter thing, obviously the social aspect and you guys being on the show, but back to kind of like, to the U.S. soccer thing and the AGM that we're at, like, there are tools and resources, and I feel like, not to be like overly critical, but I feel like we underperform in really connecting with our, general fan base and membership when it comes to, the social media. Like, we can I think this is a lesson to me that looking at U.S. soccer, we got to get better at, which is how do we take the communications we want to disseminate and, Paul Bunyan lumberjack, like, I mean, you guys are like the East Coast Duck Dynasty looking facial hair thing going on here. You don't have to have that kind of appearance, right? But how can we get more people involved that love the game, build those relationships so that they want to come to these AGMs and go, hey, how can I get involved? How can I help? How can I, you know what I'm saying?
Can you ask me, like, being a soccer nobody, seriously, I will say, being a soccer nobody and, being involved just in our local West Virginia, but, like, I feel like a lot of people doesn't think that being involved in U.S. soccer is a thing, or there's no way you can be that because it's U.S. soccer and you're a nobody. You're just here at this little level, and how do you make it more inviting? Because I've never felt that it could be inviting just because Dave Lerma and them sitting on our state level and getting to know them, but like I would have never thought that. Like,
Right.
It's not inviting at all.
Well, right. Obviously, nobody watching the broadcast could hear what Monica said, but but to her point, which was that it's not inviting, and people think that what they do at the local level doesn't tie in to U.S. soccer because it is this big thing, and educating people that U.S. club, there's USASA, there's your local leagues, there's your local clubs, and it literally goes down, and there's a lot of local clubs, there's a few local leagues, there's less associations, there's less sanctioning organizations for them, and there's only one U.S. soccer, and people just absolutely do not understand that that's how it works, because every other sport in the United States does not work that way. I mean, it's just that simple. This is the only sport that works this way. It's the only sport that can dictate how the game works at every level. And I think that just educating the general participant in the game is important to get them to understand this. Like I said, 20 years ago, I had no idea about U.S. soccer. Even 10 years ago when I started coaching, I didn't really understand how it worked. Like, just because you look at it on a piece of paper and you Google it and you look it up, you don't really understand how it works. When I went to my very first West Virginia soccer AGM, like, that's when I saw how it worked. That's when you go and you show up and you see how the sausage is made. That's when you really get it, because that's when I went, oh, they're literally talking about U.S. soccer stuff. Like, this isn't like just some thing that,
right.
I'm just trying to talk to people and get them to do something for me. And when I saw all that, I was like, man, this is so different. Just showed up at things. Like, if you don't like how your club is being ran, go to the board meeting. Like, you don't have to be on the board to go to the board meeting. Just go to the board meeting and sit in it.
Well, how often though, and this is goes all the way down to the local level. Mm-hmm. How much of the culture of U.S. soccer in the youth space, adult amateur space, even professional space, is the proactive communication about even a board meeting part of the culture? Because my experience is it's not. Like, you got to go track it down. Like, you have to want to know the information to go find it. It's not like, oh, hey, we're going to let you know we're meeting Tuesday at X or whatever, so, I mean, is that from a federation level, like, is that something that they need to look at? Like, how we address the culture of engagement of, getting people involved in membership, working or volunteering within the membership? Is that something the federation should look at? Because I don't feel like that's talked about very much. Is how do we get, because, no offense, but like, if you walk around this convention, I mean, you've got a bunch of people that are, have been around for a while. I mean, just to be frank, eventually you got to have somebody else show up, right? I mean, let's just call it like it is. We all have an expiration date here. This is, for all of us, and we don't know when we're.
I'll talk about some things we try at the club. I actually feel young, so I would say that.
So you're saying you don't want to change it, that you like coming to these and feeling young.
Right.
Okay, you're out. We need someone else. If you're watching this in Maine, we need someone else to come in. I'm just kidding, John. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, and obviously it just mirrors the demographic trends we have in our country with, the baby boomers and that bubble there. So I would, yes, definitely say, if you are interested in U.S. soccer, become interested in your local club, become interested in your state association. I have found, I think 2 years ago, the club I co-founded 5 years ago, a couple years ago, we started referring to our players and their parents as members of the club as opposed to customers. Not that we ever referred to them as customers, but we actually referred to them as members. We changed our policies.
It's a mindset change.
It is.
Yeah, culture change.
We changed our policies so that we made them voting members of our club. Anytime we have one of our upcoming board meetings, I send out communication about save the date. We send out the agenda. And I think that's definitely a culture change that is needed, because I think the feedback I've gotten from our players and our parents has been that that's a different attitude than they've encountered with other clubs,
right?
Who that is bigger than themselves, and they don't feel like they're just customers who, if there is communication, it's just to mollify them as a
here. And the reason why I bring this up is a point you just made. A lot of times there's this conversation of either or when it comes to, are you a soccer first, I deal with the business to stay in business of soccer first, or am I using soccer as the vehicle or the tool for business to make money, right? This is the dichotomy, the conversation that happens. We've talked about on this show many times the idea of pay to play, and how in some aspects and in some places it's just gotten way out of whack in terms of the amount of money that families are paying in for their kids to play and register and travel and hotels and all this stuff. So, as you were talking, something kind of came to my mind today from the budget Q&A, and that was in the area of the national teams. This is a big, for anyone watching, the Federation has been talking a lot today on the budget in terms of their kind of guaranteed revenue that they get from two primary sources. First being, Nike in their kind of guaranteed sponsor deal that they have with them and some of their other sponsor deals, but like Nike's the cornerstone they always kind of go back to. Yep. And the second being their Soccer United Marketing kind of broadcast deal, where Soccer United Marketing, Major League Soccer, they've made a lot of money that way. Many would argue that kind of guarantee, we know we're getting this every year.
I believe they said it was $54 million with those two numbers added again.
Yeah, that sounds right. And then in the other category, they kept talking about this variation of, expenses depending on if it's a World Cup year, if it's an Olympic year, different things going on because of their national teams. That the expenses and the revenue kind of goes up and down, and it's something they have to deal with in their budget. And in the course of that conversation, now that you've got a little bit of context there, they were talking about the national teams, and at certain times they don't really care about the cost, because the most important thing is the 3 points. I agree with that assessment. Like, if we've got to qualify for the World Cup, I would rather lose, or in the way I would look at it, and I think the way that Brian Remedi was talking today, I would rather look at it as an investment of $5 million so that we qualify for a World Cup than we don't, right? So I'm not saying every single match needs to be revenue neutral or has to be a profit. I totally get their mentality there. But what was brought up is this space, to me, where we can find a middle ground instead of just being soccer, and yet at the same time set the Federation up for a win-win. Chris, what were your thoughts hearing that today? Did you feel like there is a happy medium or middle
model, which is, what's the demand going to be? Let's estimate the amount, of demand at the different prices, and at what point, at what price do we make the most money? What the lowest price with the most people, we can get the most profit and whatever. Like, when do we start weighing, or how much weight do they put into, okay, well, yeah, that's one way to look at it. And another way to look at it is can we make that same amount of money, gross that same amount of money, but draw a sellout?
Right.
And how much weight do they put into that? And, their point was, well, if you devalue the ticket and you devalue this product, it's really hard to then raise the price back up, And, I get that. And, I maybe don't agree that that's the way that we should attack this, because, we talk about the term growing the game, allowing people, and especially, new fans, to fall in love with the experience of going to a national team game and the crowd being amazing, and the stadium is packed and the atmosphere is great. And I'm going to assume, just like every other player in the world, when the stadium is full and the lights are bright, and there's not 4,000 people in Carson, California watching the game, they're going to play better, and I do know this from experience, importance. And I think that that's a very important question. And that's why I asked it today. I asked several, this line of questioning, because to me, it's important that we understand, the decision maker's thought process here. Are we more worried about making as much money as we can, even though they did say that, look, it's not always the most important to make as much money as we can. And I think we can agree that they do sometimes put games in venues that maybe aren't going to make as much money as they can, because they're more worried about, making sure the crowd isn't hostile,
right?
And that's a totally different discussion. If we had more people that were willing to go to the games, would we ever have hostile crowds?
Right.
I mean, we are the home team,
right?
But that's also comes into where we weight this. If over the course of a 4-year cycle we were drawing 35,000 to every game, it would be a lot harder for Costa Rican fans or Panamanian fans to fill up half the stadium.
Right.
So, that was why I think it's important that those questions are asked and this discussion is had, because this isn't something that, anybody in this room can have an effect on. But, if the conversation is continuous, hopefully it's just a,
That's Scott over there. You can't see him.
Yeah, you can't. He's off camera.
He's off camera. He's hanging out in the background over there. But I can't be on the couch. That's like the man beard couch. I can't even be on the man beard couch. So kind of bringing this to a close as we wrap this thing up, I want to get some predictions for tomorrow, as what you're looking for, kind of looking ahead. John, first with you. I'm gonna put you both on the spot with a couple of questions. So first, do you think that any of the bylaw policy proposals pass that were basically kind of shut down by the board? Do you think any of those pass or no?
It sounds like at least one is going to be rescinded before it's put to a vote. I have no experience in these type of things, but I would imagine none of them have momentum heading into tomorrow.
Right. What about you, Chris, on that?
I'm 100% on. I don't think any of them pass. No.
Okay. So looking at tomorrow, the other thing big thing on the agenda is it's a day where Carlos has to give a speech. No, that's not the big thing on the agenda, but it is one of the things on the agenda. It's just kind of a tradition that he gives kind of a State of the Union type of speech. Mm-hmm. Hopefully tomorrow afterwards there will be some media time. Last year was able to kind of ask him a few questions. We'll see how the media availability is tomorrow to get some questions. So if you do have some questions before we wrap up here, hit them, send them to me at Daniel Workman, Twitter or Instagram. DMs are open. So if you do have a question for Carlos tomorrow, if I'm able to get in to ask some questions after the National Council meeting, I'd be more than happy to try to get some of those questions asked. The big thing on the agenda tomorrow is your prediction. Do you see a new vice president, or do you see it a re-election with Cindy? And if so, I'll even throw this out there. what do you think the numbers might be? We're going to go all politics. It's an election year. Let's go all in for a moment.
So I'm going to wimp out again.
Okay.
I'm going to say I don't know, because I think there was one distinct conversation between two people who seem to be very in the know about the situation and the sort of horse trading that might be happening or whatever. And one person said so-and-so is the preferred candidate of this fill in the blank, powerful constituency or person. And then the other person involved in the conversation essentially said, that's interesting because I've actually heard the opposite.
Okay.
So I have
So your answer is you have no idea.
I have no idea.
All right, Chris, up to you. What's your prediction?
I mean, I don't really like to predict them, but this is how I'll say it. It all will come down to how the professional council votes. Like, you'll be able to tell. Like, I think that everybody else will be about even, So like, if the professional council decides that they want Cindy,
then Cindy wins.
Cindy wins. And if they decide that they want John Mata, then John Mata wins. That's what you'll know. From this election, you'll know which one of the two candidates was the preferred candidate of the professionals.
Around 25%, give or take a little bit of change, and then there's some at-large votes
For 5%.
Right. So the election basically block the athletes.
Right.
So if they vote as a block at 20%, then that's leaving the adult amateur and the youth space as kind of a space that may get kind of chopped up a little bit, split. So that's why you would go to, okay, the pros are going to kind of really get this across the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, John Mata is going to get most of the adult vote, as I think everybody would assume that he would. I think that he will do well in the youth space. The other 5%, I think he'll actually do well in that. I mean, he's well liked. I mean, like, a lot of people really like John. I really like John. He's a really nice guy. And I think that nobody is going to get to 50%. Neither one of the two candidates is going to get to 50% from those constituency groups. So the 25% that's left over, I don't know if they're going to even vote, as a group. I mean, they're right now, with NISA getting votes for this first time, I believe. I don't know, actually, they're provisionally sanctioned. I don't know if they are.
I don't think they get votes until the next AGM.
Right.
I think that's
yeah, that's correct. But even with that, NWSL, USL, and MLS, are three different voting groups, and right now I don't have any kind of insider information about who's going to vote for, they're not diametrically opposed to each other. Use as their best option going forward, and that's what it's going to be. So you're going to know after tomorrow at noon, who they like the most.
So, kind of last little thing here. Going through, this is your first AGM. This is your third. Mm-hmm. I want to get your thoughts in terms of how do we get better from an AGM perspective, an experience perspective. So, this is a little bit of a free feedback session for U.S. Soccer House. How do we make the AGMs better? How do we leverage these days to get even more out of them to help the U.S. Soccer Federation reach its potential?
So before I answer that question, I do want to end the night with at least one bold prediction.
Okay.
I do look forward to the small state consortium tomorrow. I guess it's going to be one of the first times where smaller states are basically caucusing together, not related to the election per se.
Right.
But I think small states recognize that they probably share a lot more similarities than differences. And so trying to reinvent the wheel sharing ideas and possible solutions. So
and when is this taking place? This is first I've heard of this.
This is after.
Yeah, I think it's 1 o'clock.
It's 1 o'clock tomorrow.
Okay, so this is after the National Council.
Correct.
So this is looking ahead into like 2021 and
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and it has. I think the biggest takeaway is it's not enough time to do the things that we want done, right? The AGM obviously is where some of these policies or bylaws might actually be voted on, but it's the work, the other 363 days of the year that are really key in changing things for the better.
How about you, Chris?
I think that something that I have thought every year, and this is because, for work, I've been to a lot of conferences, whether they were national conferences for big organizations or whatever. They don't ask for our feedback, here at all, ever. Like, they don't even ask if we like the hotel. Like, not in a real manner. You know what I mean? And I think that it would be smart if U.S. Soccer engaged, like, its members more when it came to, hey, what do you really want out of this? And this is an argument that, that I've had with the coaching education people a lot. Like
you have an argument with someone at the Federation about an idea?
Right. They don't ask. They have never asked us what we want to get out of this. Just because, 30 years ago, this is what the AGM needed to be. It might need to be something different right now.
Right.
They might need to offer things that aren't offered now. Like, there are subjects that about governance and running state of those ideas, and then you take them back to where you're from, and then you implement them, or you say, take the piece that you can use, and then you come back the next year and say, hey, I talked to, Scott, and he told me that, they do this there. So we tried it, but that didn't really work. But we got an idea that we started to do this, and that worked, about all of the different things, and it could even be, like, how do you handle when people, these bylaws and your policies, and how do you, what does everybody else do when it comes to, members applying for, or people applying for membership with your organization? What's the standards that you set? What's the minimum club size? Like, just all this information that could be shared in this sitting, because we're all here.
Right.
And that's the thing that I think that's missing here. Collaboration. And it's so focused on, federation business that we're forgetting that the members make up the federation, so the members need to be together some. Now, whether that requires the event to be, 1 day longer, to give, 4 hours or 6 hours worth of time. It accomplished a lot just for me personally, and the information that I'll share to the populace via social media. But like, if I would have been able to go to there's only so many ways that we can handle this part, but we can offer this to be more, and make it a learning environment in addition to an administrative environment.
Right. There's a few takeaways that I took observing. The first is this. This is the second year in a row I've come in a media capacity. 3 years ago, I was here as part of a campaign. These last 2 years as part of a media capacity, and there's not enough media presence here.
Absolutely.
I love getting some one-on-one time with different federation staff and whatever, and being one of the only people walking around with a yellow badge. A lot of people cutting eyes like, what? Who? who has the yellow badge, because I don't see any of those going around. And it's not because I'm special, it's because I'm like one of the few that actually just showed up to cover this thing. So the first thing for me is I would like to see more media coverage, more media presence here at these events. Another,
especially from the media partners.
Yeah, the media partners of the Federation, right?
Neither Fox nor ESPN are here.
Correct. Not even for like a little live report or anything. And I would compare that to last spring in Miami. FIFA showed up for some meetings. I went down to cover some of those, and there was a little bit of that for me is an area where I think we got to get better. Dissecting every, crook and cranny of the NFL and a team and a coach and a decision and who's going to be here and who's going to be there and hypotheticals, and we don't get anybody to show up in a major way from a media side at these events. So that's the first thing that really stands out to me. I saw it last year, seeing it again this year. Another thing for me that I would like to see from U.S. Soccer is less at the AGM. When it is the public parts of the sessions. Earlier in the week, go for it. If there's something that happens and you need to do this as a kind of an exception to the rule, I get it. Fine. But there should be very little closed executive sessions.
Right.
On Fridays when you're trying to get into, like, I never made it into the athlete council meeting because 15 minutes in, by the time I got back over there, and they were scheduled for like a 2 or 3 hour meeting.
Yeah, I think it was scheduled 1 to 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So like 15 minutes after the meeting started, they kick everybody out for a closed session, and then it just stays closed. So, what's the point if you can't even get in and observe or even have a Q&A with the athletes? Hey, what are you guys thinking? What are you guys looking at? So that's another piece that I think would be a lot better if you minimize, especially on these Fridays where if the format stays the same, you get away from having executive closed sessions. Let that business be handled, on a Thursday before everybody gets in, or a Wednesday earlier in the week, or some other time. And if it is an emergency and it's pressing because the National Council meeting's on Saturday and you do need something, I get it, fine. But that's a second piece for me. A third thing that I think the Federation could do better at is the area of from Nike. I can't even go and buy, if I wanted to go and buy my kids merch, there's not even a U.S. Soccer store to go buy soccer merch here. I mean, to me, these are like obvious no-brainers, opportunities for the Federation and the other media partners. There's no Volkswagen car sitting outside. There
is one of those.
Okay, I missed the car.
Yeah.
All right, so I take that back. Sorry, Volkswagen. Sorry, U.S. Soccer. I take that one back. But there's not been a big media presence in general from all of the media partners and the commercial partners at the event. So those are some areas where I think, I agree with the things you both pointed out, but I think there's some other easy things that should be a bigger point of emphasis to try to get more media coverage. And the last thing I would leave with in this as we wrap up is, if I'm U.S. Soccer and I want to build those relationships, going back to the Twitter moment we talked about earlier in the show tonight, why are we not giving regular updates and live streams from sessions throughout the day for the countless thousands of volunteers, millions of volunteers across this country that are what makes soccer even happen? Of some information, even like the budget thing today, I think would have been fascinating for happen.
I 100% agree with you. And I mean, look, if you want to keep people engaged and you want to turn people that are casual followers of, the sport, and the organization into people that really, really care, then you have to give them the ability I mean, you have to give them things to care about. And like watching the budget meeting or watching the board meeting, some people are going to be like, man, I don't want any part of that.
Sure.
But there are going to be a sizable group of people that are going to go, okay, this is what I'm here for. Like, I really care about, equal pay for the women's team, and I'm going to watch this so that I can learn more about what's going on. I want to watch them talk about it, or if they don't talk about it, which they didn't, and go from there. I mean, that's how you have to give people stuff, other than a 30-second video of practice.
Right.
Completely. Right. No, I mean, they all great points all the way around. And I just want to reiterate something that we talked about earlier. Like, all of this stuff that we're saying is from a position of caring.
Right.
And that's the thing. We care enough, that we want them to do better. Seeing it and what they're offering us, as we're all here because, we're here to learn, to participate, to vote, and you're here to cover it as a media member. They can do a better job, and hopefully they will do a better job because, like you said, they will watch. And they already know that this episode was happening, and
right.
they're going to go back and watch the stream later, and
right.
and they're going to listen to every single bit of it, and it will get better,
Yeah, that's my hope as well. Guys, thanks so much for moved as a member with their sanctioning so that they are official and no more provisional in that regards. That's another important thing on the agenda tomorrow.
And the thing that I'm looking forward to tomorrow, the U.S. Open Cup Committee meeting.
U.S. Open Cup Committee, yep. After that's in the afternoon portion after the National Council meeting. So stay tuned. We'll have some other updates as well with all of that. Guys, thanks so much for coming on the show and spending some time with us this evening. You guys have been amazing. So, you guys want to say bye to everyone?
Bye, and thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely. You can watch the show always at danielworkman.com, now at begatv.com. It's a new digital soccer channel we are building to bring more content like this to you. Next week, I'll actually be in Europe all week. And the first part of the week covering the Laureate Sports Awards. So we'll have some content out for that as well. Watch on Facebook.com/WRKMN. Catch me on Twitter or Instagram at Daniel Workman. Shoot me some DMs for Carlos Cordero, who's the president of U.S. Soccer. If you want to try to get some questions in tomorrow, I'll try to get those asked. Can't make any promises, but we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching. As always, we'll see you again later.